The autumn breeze rustled through the oak trees, lining the quiet cul-de-sac as Daniel Harper pulled into his driveway. The fading sunlight stretched long shadows across his two-story colonial home, and through the kitchen window, he spotted Laura moving about, her silhouette a familiar presence he had cherished for over a decade. Yet recently, something about her movements seemed different, more cautious, perhaps. Daniel turned off the engine of his BMW, his briefcase heavy with legal documents resting on the passenger seat. His thoughts were clouded by recent observations. How Laura's phone always seemed to vanish in her pocket the moment he entered the room. The phone calls taken behind closed doors with the sound of water running, and the new passwords on devices that had been accessible before. Before he could grab his keys, the front door opened. Laura stood there, composed in her cream blouse and tailored skirt, her auburn hair cascading past her shoulders. She smiled, but the warmth didn't reach her eyes. "You're home early," she said, stepping aside to let him in. The air inside carried the rich aroma of garlic and fresh herbs. She had been cooking, something she had started doing with more flair lately, as though compensating for something. "Light day at the office," Daniel replied, loosening his tie. He noticed how she subtly shifted her body away when he leaned in to kiss her cheek. "Smells amazing. Just trying out a new recipe," Laura said briskly, hurrying back to the kitchen. Her heels clicked softly against the hardwood floor. "Don't forget, we need to leave for your dad's in an hour. It's Sunday dinner." Daniel watched her retreat, noting the slight tension in her posture. After 10 years of marriage, he had learned to read every nuance in her body language. Something was off and had been for weeks, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly what. Upstairs, as Daniel changed into casual clothes, he caught glimpses of Laura through the bathroom door. She was applying fresh makeup, her phone buzzing on the counter. Her hand darted out, snatching it up, her fingers flying over the screen before she swiftly deleted whatever message had appeared. "Everything okay?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. "Hmm? Oh, yes," Laura replied without looking up. "Just Jenna. She's having a rough time with the divorce. You know how it is." Daniel did know. As a family law attorney, he had seen countless marriages unravel and had become adept at recognizing the warning signs. The irony that he was now applying those skills to his own marriage wasn't lost on him. The drive to his father's house was quiet, punctuated only by soft piano music playing through the car speakers and Laura's occasional comments about her projects at the advertising firm. Daniel noticed how she kept her phone face down on her lap, a new habit. His father's colonial-style home stood on a spacious lot, its well-kept garden a reflection of his meticulous nature. Pulling into the circular driveway, Daniel saw his sister Evelyn's Lexus already parked. A sense of unease stirred within him. Evelyn had been distant recently, canceling their usual coffee catch-ups with vague explanations. "Daniel, Laura," his father called from the porch, his silver hair immaculate despite the damp evening air. He greeted them warmly, though Daniel noticed the hug Laura received was noticeably brief. "Come in. Evelyn's already here." The dining room was set with the family's best dishes, as it was every Sunday. Evelyn stood by the fireplace, a glass of wine in hand, her tailored blouse and slacks giving her an air of quiet confidence. She raised her glass in greeting, but stayed rooted in place. "Daniel," she said with a nod, then added, "Laura," with a tone that made Daniel's instincts as an attorney sharpen. There was something calculated in her voice, something out of place for a casual family dinner. As they sat down, the familiar scent of his father's classic pot roast filled the room, but tonight it seemed overshadowed by a tense undercurrent. "So, Laura," his father began, passing the breadbasket, "I missed you at church last Sunday. Mrs. Carter asked about you." Laura's fork paused midair. "Oh yes, I had to leave early," she said smoothly. "Jenna needed me for lunch. She's been going through a lot." His father's eyes narrowed slightly. "Jenna? That's odd. I ran into her at the farmer's market that afternoon, and she mentioned being in Chicago all weekend for work." The silence that followed was palpable. Daniel glanced at Laura, noticing the slight flush in her cheeks and the way her grip tightened on her glass. "I must have mixed up the weekends," Laura said with a light laugh. "Work's been so hectic lately. The days seem to blur together sometimes." Daniel felt his father's gaze on him, noting the subtle shake of his head. Robert Harper had an uncanny ability to sense when something was amiss, a skill honed through 40 years of marriage and raising 3 children. Speaking of the firm, Evelyn interjected quickly. Daniel, did you review the McAllister case files I sent over? Never got them, Daniel replied, studying his sister's expression. When did you send them? Last Thursday evening, Evelyn said, shifting slightly in her chair. I left them on your desk after hours. Strange. I was at the office late Thursday. Never saw them. The tension in the room deepened. Laura's phone buzzed in her purse by her feet, and Daniel noticed the slight stiffening in her posture at the sound. Excuse me, she murmured, rising from her seat. I should take this. It might be Jenna. As Laura stepped out of the room, Robert leaned closer to Daniel, his voice lowered. Something's not right with her lately, Daniel. A father can tell these things. Dad, Evelyn warned, but Robert waved her off. Don't dad me, Evelyn. I've known Laura since she started dating Daniel in law school. She's changed, distracted, nervous. Robert's eyes bore into Daniel's. And you've noticed it too, haven't you? Before Daniel could respond, Laura reappeared, her cheeks slightly flushed. Sorry about that. Where were we? The rest of dinner passed in a haze of strained conversation and sidelong glances. Daniel found himself scrutinizing every interaction. The way Evelyn barely acknowledged Laura. How Laura's laugh seemed overly bright when Robert mentioned their upcoming anniversary. That night, as they got ready for bed, Daniel watched Laura check her phone one last time before plugging it in, the screen angled carefully away from him. Everything okay with Jenna? He asked evenly. What? Oh, yes. Just sister stuff, you know. Laura slipped under the covers, turning her back to him. I'm thinking of visiting her next weekend. She's going through a lot right now. Daniel lay staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing as she feigned sleep. His father's words lingered in his mind, feeding a growing sense of doubt. The next morning, Daniel arrived at Harper and Associates earlier than usual. The office was quiet, sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their downtown corner office. He walked toward Evelyn's workspace, noting the newly installed security cameras in the hallways, one of her recent pet projects. Her desk was as spotless as ever, but something on the floor near the visitor's chair caught his attention, a small silver earring. He picked it up, the design instantly recognizable. Laura owned a pair just like it. The sound of the office door opening drew his attention. Evelyn entered, a coffee cup in hand, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. You're in early, she said, heading toward her desk. Thought I'd check for those McAllister files you mentioned. Daniel held up the earring. Found this instead. Evelyn's face remained composed. Must belong to a client. Must be, Daniel replied, pocketing the earring. Odd, though. Looks a lot like the pair I gave Laura for our anniversary last year. The siblings locked eyes, years of shared experiences and unspoken tensions hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Evelyn looked away. The McAllister files must have gotten misplaced. I'll check the system, she said, turning to her computer. I'll have my assistant look for them. Daniel nodded, heading back to his office. He had handled enough cases to recognize avoidance when he saw it. As he sat at his desk, his phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. Daniel Harper speaking. Mr. Harper? This is Caitlin Callahan. You handled my divorce case last year. Of course, Mrs. Callahan. How can I help you? There was a pause on the line. This is delicate. I do some PI work now, and I've been working a case at the Crestwood Hotel. I thought you should know. I've seen your wife's car there. 3 Thursday nights in a row. Same time, same duration. Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. Thursday nights. Laura's book club meetings. You're sure? I have photos if you want them. Room 304. I remembered how you helped me when I found out about my ex, and thought I owed you the same courtesy. Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. Daniel's voice remained steady, even as his world seemed to tilt. I'll handle it from here. The rest of the week passed in a haze of careful observation and mounting evidence. Daniel began noticing things he had subconsciously registered for weeks. How Laura always seemed to keep her phone on silent now, the way she had changed her email password, the growing number of sister emergencies. On Friday morning, Daniel walked into their bedroom as Laura was packing an overnight bag. Weekend trip, he asked, watching her carefully select clothes. Brittany's having a rough time, Laura replied, not meeting his eyes. You know how it is with her divorce. Sisters need to stick together right now. Daniel nodded, his gaze flicking to the new lingerie set she was packing. The one she bought last month but never worn at home. Of course, give her my best. After Laura left, Daniel picked up her jacket from where she had draped it over the chair. In the pocket, his fingers found what he had both dreaded and expected, a key card for room 304 at the Crestwood Hotel. His hands shook slightly as he photographed the card with his phone. Then, with the methodical precision he used in building a case, he called Brittany's number. Daniel. Brittany sounded surprised. Is everything okay? Just checking in, he said calmly. Laura mentioned she was staying with you this weekend. Wanted to make sure you're doing all right with everything. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, Brittany spoke, her voice tight. Daniel, I'm in Chicago at a business conference. Have been all week. I see. Daniel closed his eyes, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. Thanks, Brittany. Take care. As he hung up, Daniel stared at the key card in his hand. 10 years of marriage, a lifetime of trusting his sister, all unraveling in his grasp like a fragile thread. The lawyer in him knew what needed to be done. Evidence, documentation, careful planning. The husband in him wanted to drive to the hotel that very moment. The lawyer won out. He had the weekend to prepare, to gather evidence, to ensure that when he confronted them, there would be no room for excuses, no way to twist the truth. Daniel had seen too many clients lose everything by acting on emotion instead of logic. Sitting at his desk, he stared at the key card. As a partner at Harper & Associates, he had built his career on handling cases just like this. How many times had he sat across from clients, pointing out the warning signs they had missed? Now, those same signs were flashing unmistakably in his own life. The irony wasn't lost on him. For years, he and Evelyn had worked side by side, building their reputation as the city's leading family law firm. Specializing in infidelity cases, Daniel and Evelyn had seen every variation of betrayal, every excuse, every pattern. Now Daniel was living one of their case files. The key card for room 304 sat heavily in his hand. Physical proof of what his instincts had been whispering for weeks. As both a husband and a lawyer seasoned in infidelity cases, he could no longer deny the truth. His wife and his own sister had betrayed him, and now he had the evidence to prove it. Robert's words from dinner echoed in his mind. A father knows these things. He had tried to warn Daniel in his way, and now it was time to uncover just how deep this betrayal ran. The setting autumn sun cast long shadows across his office. In the encroaching darkness, Daniel began to plan. He would build his case methodically, gather his evidence carefully, and when the moment came, he would ensure Laura and Evelyn understood exactly what they had thrown away. For now, he had work to do. The key card rested on his desk like a ticking clock. Room 304 loomed in his mind, waiting like a court date on his calendar. Thursday nights at the Crestwood Hotel. The puzzle pieces were there. Now it was about assembling them into an undeniable picture. Daniel grabbed a legal pad and began writing, each note a brick in the fortress he was building around his heart. When finished, there would be no escape, no explanations, no twisting of the facts. They had chosen their path. He would ensure they walked it alone. Morning light filtered through the blinds of Daniel's home office, casting striped shadows on the evidence arrayed across his mahogany desk. The hotel key card seemed to mock him. Lying next to his laptop were screenshots of text messages and call logs painted a damning picture. His coffee sat untouched, long cold. The wall clock ticked past 9, the sound amplified by the silence of the house. Daniel scrolled through his contacts, finding Carlton Garrett's name. The phone rang twice. Carlton Garrett speaking. Carlton, it's Daniel Harper. A pause. Daniel, I wondered when you'd call. News travels fast in our circles. How much do you know? Enough, Daniel replied, jaw tightening. Caitlin filled me in on the Crestwood situation. Room 304, right? That's correct. I need your expertise. Remember the Parker case last year? The CEO and his assistant. Hard to forget. Save your client a fortune. I need something similar, Daniel said, drumming his fingers on the desk. But more advanced. Foolproof. Carlton exhaled. This is personal, isn't it? Very. A pause. Daniel, are you sure you want to see what's happening in that room? Some things can't be unseen. Daniel glanced at the wedding photo on his desk. Him and Laura, smiling, with Evelyn as maid of honor. That moment now felt like a cruel joke. I need to know everything, Daniel said firmly. And I need proof nobody can dispute. Carlton sighed. Meet me at my workshop in an hour. I'll clear my schedule. Carlton's workshop occupied a converted textile warehouse in the industrial district. Inside, walls were lined with surveillance equipment, and workbenches overflowed with tools and electronics. Welcome to Surveillance Central, Carlton said, leading Daniel to a workbench. He pulled out several compact devices. These are the latest covert cameras, military-grade but legal for civilian use. Daniel picked up a tiny camera smaller than his thumb. How many do I need? For full coverage? Carlton sketched a hotel room diagram. 4. One above the door, 2 for different angles, and 1 for the bed area. He hesitated. You sure about that last one? I want everything, Daniel said coldly. Every angle. Every moment. Carlton nodded. They're motion-activated, wireless, with footage transmitted to a secure server. Everything is time-stamped, GPS-tagged, and encrypted. No one can claim it's fake. Show me how to set them up. Over the next hour, Carlton walked Daniel through the setup, camera placement, angle testing, remote activation. One more thing, Carlton said, handing him a small device. A motion sensor for the hallway. Gives you a 30-second warning before anyone enters the room. Daniel pocketed it. How much do I owe you? Consider it a favor for the Parker case, Carlton replied but hesitated. Daniel, I've done a lot of surveillance work. When it's family, it's always the hardest. This isn't about family anymore, Daniel said. It's about truth. From Carlton's workshop, Daniel drove directly to Harper and Harmon Law. Merle Harmon's corner office overlooked the city skyline, though today the blinds were drawn against the bright morning sun. Merle looked up as Daniel entered, her reading glasses perched on the edge of her nose. I've been expecting you, she said. Word travels that fast? Daniel asked. In our profession? Like wildfire. Merle gestured to the chair across from her desk. Especially when it involves partners at Harper and Harmon. Though, I admit, I'm surprised you're here and not at Jacobson's office. Daniel sat down, his posture rigid. Jacobson's too close to Evelyn. I need someone who will handle this exactly by the book. And you think that's me? Merle removed her glasses, fixing him with a penetrating stare. Because we've been opponents so often? Because I'm the best at infidelity cases in the state? And because I've never lost one where there was clear evidence? A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Flattery will get you everywhere. But before we proceed, are you sure about this? Once I file these papers, there's no going back. I have the evidence. Photos, surveillance footage of the hotel, timestamps. Daniel's voice remained steady. By tonight, I'll have video proof. Merle raised an eyebrow. Carlton's handiwork, I assume? Everything legal. Everything documented. Of course, Merle said, pulling out a legal pad. In this state, infidelity evidence can significantly influence the settlement, but you know that better than most. She paused, studying him. What you might not know is how it feels when it's your own case, when it's your own sister. Daniel's face hardened. I need those papers ready for tonight. Tonight? Merle's pen paused mid-word. Daniel, moving too quickly I have a key card to room 304 at the Crestwood. They'll be there tonight. I need those papers ready. Merle was silent for a long moment, then nodded. I'll have them ready by 6. But remember this, you're not just a lawyer on this one. You're the client too. And clients sometimes let emotions override judgment. Not this time, Daniel said. This time, everything happens exactly by the book. The afternoon stretched endlessly as Daniel prepared. In his office at Harper and Harmon, he reviewed the firm's security footage, documenting every late-night meeting between Evelyn and Laura. The upgraded cameras Evelyn had insisted on installing provided crystal clear evidence of their betrayal. His phone buzzed. A text from Laura. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Another lie to add to the pile. At 7:30, Daniel parked his car in the Crestwood Hotel's garage, deliberately choosing a spot near the service entrance, away from the main parking area. The lobby was bustling with evening activity. Business travelers checking in, tourists planning dinner, and a wedding party posing by the fountain. No one noticed the man in the sharp suit heading for the elevators, his briefcase carrying more than just legal papers. Room 304 waited at the end of a long hallway, the carpet muffling his footsteps. Daniel checked his watch. 7:45. If the pattern held, they'd arrive separately. Laura first, then Evelyn, usually 15 minutes apart. The keycard slid smoothly into the lock, the green light welcoming him into the scene of his wife's betrayal. The room was standard luxury hotel fare. A king-size bed with crisp white linens, generic watercolor paintings, and a desk by the window overlooking the city. Daniel moved methodically, placing Carlton's cameras with surgical precision. One above the door, hidden by the decorative molding. Two more, disguised among the room's artwork, covered different angles. The final camera, focused on the bed, disappeared into the television mounting bracket. Each camera connected to his phone with a soft ping, their feeds appearing on his screen in perfect clarity. The motion sensor went in the hallway, just past the ice machine. At 7:55, Daniel positioned himself by the window, partially concealed by the heavy curtains. His phone vibrated, movement detected in the hallway. The sound of heels clicking on tile, then carpet. A key card in the lock. Laura entered, wearing the black dress she'd bought last month. The price tag had raised his eyebrows at the time. Now he knew why she'd wanted to look special. She set her purse on the desk, then froze as she spotted him. Her voice cracked. "What are you?" The door opened again. Evelyn stepped in, already loosening her tie. "Sorry I'm late. I had to finish that Peterson brief." The words died in her throat as she saw her brother. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. Daniel reached for his phone, activating all cameras with a single tap. Small red lights blinked to life around the room, recording everything. 10 years, Daniel said quietly, his voice steady despite the storm raging in his chest. 10 years of marriage. 35 years of sisterhood. And this is what it comes to. Laura moved first, fumbling toward her purse. "Daniel, please, this isn't what it looks like." Daniel's laugh was hollow. Like the room service bills charged to the firm's corporate card? Like the late-night meetings at the office? He turned to Evelyn. "Like those security cameras you insisted on upgrading last month?" Evelyn stepped forward, her hands raised. "Daniel, let's talk about this rationally." Rationally? Daniel's voice could have frozen fire. "Like siblings? Or like lawyers? Like family?" Evelyn pleaded. "We can figure this out." "Family." Daniel pulled the divorce papers from his briefcase and placed them deliberately on the desk. "You know what's interesting about family law, Evelyn? How patterns repeat. The lies, the excuses, the betrayals, they're all the same. I just never thought I'd be living one of our case files." Laura had begun to cry, her mascara streaking down her face. "It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. We never meant to get caught." Daniel cut her off. "That's what they all say, isn't it, Evelyn? How many times have we heard that in depositions? It was a mistake. We never meant to hurt anyone. At least be original." Evelyn's face went pale as her eyes landed on the cameras. "You can't use those recordings. It's a violation of privacy laws." "In a public hotel? With a key card giving me legal access?" Daniel's smile was razor sharp. "Do you really think I didn't do this by the book? Check the firm's security logs. Check the hotel records. Everything's documented. Everything's legal. Just like you taught me, sister." The word sister hit Evelyn like a blow. She sank into the desk chair, her usual poise shattered. Laura made another desperate attempt. "Daniel, please. We can talk about this. We can get counseling. Work through. There's nothing to work through." Daniel checked his phone, confirming the cameras were recording flawlessly. "The papers are on the desk. Merle Harmon will contact you both tomorrow." Evelyn's head snapped up. Merle Harmon? You're bringing her into this? She's handling my divorce, Daniel said flatly. I think you know her reputation with infidelity cases. He moved toward the door. And Evelyn? The firm's board meets next week. I suggest you review your partnership agreement, specifically the morality clause. The color drained from Evelyn's face. You wouldn't. I would. I am. Daniel paused at the door. The firm's security cameras caught everything. Every late-night meeting. Every time you use company resources to conduct your affair. Funny how evidence piles up once you start looking for it. He stepped into the hallway, but Laura's voice stopped him. Daniel, wait. Please. I'll do anything. Don't show those videos to anyone. Think about our families. Daniel turned back one final time. You should have thought about our families before using Brittany's name to cover your affair. Before betraying not just me, but everyone who trusted you both. The door closed behind him with a decisive click. In the elevator, his phone buzzed with messages. Laura begging for forgiveness. Evelyn issuing veiled threats. He muted them both without a second glance. The cool night air greeted him as he exited the hotel. His phone vibrated again. It was Robert. Of course his father would sense something was wrong. Daniel. Robert's voice was thick with worry. Is everything all right? I've been trying to reach Evelyn, but she's not answering. Daniel's voice caught, the lawyer's facade cracking slightly. You need to sit down. There's something you need to know. The call lasted 20 minutes. By the end, Robert was in tears, his worst suspicions confirmed. Oh, my boy, my children. I can't believe this. I have proof. Videos. Documents. Everything. Does Brittany know? Robert asked, his voice breaking. They used her name. Not yet. I'll tell her tomorrow. Daniel reached his car, exhaustion pressing down on him like a weight. Dad? I'm sorry. About Evelyn. About all of it. Don't you dare apologize. Robert said, his voice hardening with paternal resolve. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you hear me? They're the ones who should be sorry. After hanging up, Daniel sat in his car, watching the hotel entrance. His phone was silent now, the weight of the night settling over him. The keycard for room 304 lay on the passenger seat, a grim reminder of the truth he could no longer ignore. Eventually, Daniel saw them leave separately. Laura first, clutching her purse tightly, as though it could shield her from what had just unfolded. 10 minutes later, Evelyn followed, her tie still undone, her expression hollow. Both looked shaken, their own actions weighing heavily on them. His phone buzzed one last time. A message from Carlton. Cameras caught everything. Files uploading to secure server now. You okay? Daniel didn't reply. He started his car and headed toward his father's house. Robert would undoubtedly be waiting, ready to help pick up the pieces of their fractured family. The night stretched ahead, filled with difficult calls, painful explanations, and harsh truths. But for now, Daniel drove through the quiet streets, his evidence gathered, his confrontation complete. The lawyer in him knew he had handled the situation impeccably. The brother and the husband within him, those parts would have to wait their turn to process the devastation. Another buzz. This time it was Brittany. His heart sank. She must have already heard something. Daniel. Brittany's voice trembled. Dad just called me. Tell me it's not true. Tell me they didn't use me as their cover. Brittany, Daniel said softly, I'm so sorry. All those times. Her voice cracked. I suspected something, but I was afraid to say anything. I didn't want to tear the family apart. And they were using my name the whole time. I have proof of everything, Daniel reassured her. You don't have to carry the guilt anymore. The line went silent except for the sound of Brittany's muffled sobs. Finally, she whispered, What happens now? Right now, I'm heading to Dad's. He needs us. As Daniel pulled into Robert's driveway, he saw his father's silhouette framed in the window waiting. Behind him, other family members had already begun to gather, drawn together by the gravity of what had transpired. The night wasn't over yet. There were still truths to confront, pain to process, and family bonds to be tested, broken, and perhaps rebuilt. But for now, Daniel had done what needed to be done. He had faced the truth and brought it into the light. Whatever came next would wait until tomorrow. The grandfather clock in the Harper family home struck 9 as Daniel finished setting up the audiovisual equipment. Through the study window, he watched another car pull into the circular driveway, his Aunt Margaret's silver Lexus, followed by Uncle Richard's Range Rover. The family was gathering, unaware that they were about to witness the unraveling of everything they thought they knew. In the kitchen, Robert methodically arranged coffee cups on a serving tray, his movements deliberately measured to hide the slight tremor in his hands. The Wedgwood china set, a wedding gift from Daniel's grandmother, felt especially delicate today. The Petersons just arrived. James called from his post by the front window. He had been keeping watch for the past hour as relatives trickled in. And Richard's with them. Daniel nodded. Richard Peterson had been the Harper family's attorney for 3 generations. His presence wasn't coincidental. James must have called him. Did you tell them? Robert's voice carried from the kitchen. About what we're going to see? No, Daniel replied, double-checking. The video timestamps. Some things need to be seen firsthand. The doorbell chimed. Joshua Dow's commanding presence filled the doorframe, his pastoral collar a stark white against his dark suit. Behind him, his wife, Sarah, clutched her Bible as though it were armor. Evelyn's fiancée, Valerie Morrow, stood just behind them, her Louboutin heels glinting under the porch light. Daniel. Joshua's voice carried the weight of decades of sermons. Robert was cryptic on the phone. He said this concerns both our families. Before Daniel could respond, Brittany brushed past them into the house. Her tailored blazer and pencil skirt were pristine, but her eyes were red-rimmed behind her glasses. She had spent the night restless after Daniel had shared a preview of what was to come. Dad, she nodded to Joshua before turning to Daniel. The Carlsons are right behind me. Margaret wanted to bring Elizabeth too. Elizabeth. Sarah raised an eyebrow. But she's only 16. She needs to see this, Brittany said firmly. Everyone needs to see who they really are. The living room quickly filled as more family arrived. James had rearranged the furniture the night before, creating a makeshift theater for what was about to unfold. The large TV screen dominated one wall, its dark surface reflecting the growing crowd like a silent witness. Richard Peterson appeared at Daniel's side. Your father called. Said you might need legal counsel for what's about to happen. Not counsel, Richard, Daniel replied, his voice steady. Just a witness. More families arrived. The Carlsons with their teenage daughter Elizabeth, Aunt Margaret, and Uncle Robert, cousins from both sides. The room buzzed with murmurs and confused speculation. Daniel stood before them, the remote in his hand. The faces that had shared every major moment of his life now waited, unaware that everything was about to change. Before I start, he said, his courtroom voice cutting through the noise, I want you to understand something. What you're about to see isn't edited, isn't manipulated. It's raw truth, captured legally, properly documented. Joshua shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Daniel, you're scaring Sarah. Good, Brittany interjected, her voice sharp. She should be scared. We all should be. The first video began to play. Hotel security footage, crystal clear. The timestamp showed 3 weeks ago, the same night Laura had claimed to be helping Brittany with divorce paperwork. Elizabeth Carlson gasped. Is that Aunt Laura? With Aunt Evelyn? Elizabeth, leave the room, her mother, Margaret, ordered. No, Daniel said firmly. She stays. Everyone stays. Everyone watches. Everyone sees exactly what kind of people they've been protecting. The footage continued. Evelyn's office at the firm, after hours. The upgraded security camera she had insisted on installing captured everything in stunning clarity. Joshua's Bible hit the floor with a dull thud. Sarah began to whisper prayers, her words a faint counterpoint to the damning evidence playing on the screen. Turn it off, Valerie, Evelyn's fiancée, demanded suddenly. Her face had gone pale, her perfectly manicured hands clutching her handbag tightly. I've seen enough. There's more, Daniel said. I said I've seen enough. Valerie stood abruptly, yanking off her engagement ring with such force it left a mark on her finger. The platinum band flew across the room, bouncing off the wall before disappearing under a cabinet. The front door slammed behind her, the impact rattling the windows. Richard cleared his throat. The recordings are legal? Every second, Daniel confirmed. Public spaces. Company property. Proper documentation. Evelyn approved the security system herself. Elizabeth's voice broke through the heavy silence. But why? Why would they do this? It was the innocent question of a teenager who still believed in happy endings. The adults in the room shifted uncomfortably, their own secrets and marriages suddenly under the harsh glare of scrutiny. Because they could, Brittany answered bitterly. Because they thought they were smart enough not to get caught. Because they used my name, my divorce, my pain as their excuse. Sarah finally looked up from her prayers. Joshua, say something. She's your daughter. But Joshua Dow, who had counseled countless families through crises and preached about morality and family values for decades, sat silently. His daughter's betrayal played out on screen in vivid detail, leaving no room for comforting words. The footage continued. Months of hotel visits, late-night meetings at the firm, client billing records showing hours fraudulently charged during their encounters. Each piece of evidence meticulously documented, forming an unbreakable chain of truth. The board meets tomorrow, Daniel said, his voice resolute. Evelyn's partnership will be terminated. The firm's name will change. You'll ruin her career, Sarah protested weakly. She ruined it herself, Daniel replied without hesitation. James finally broke the silence. Every time he used company resources for his affair. Every time he billed clients for hours spent with my daughter-in-law. Elizabeth, who had been quiet since her initial outburst, suddenly asked, "What about their souls?" The room went still. Leave it to a teenager to cut to the core of the issue. Joshua finally stirred, his pastoral instincts taking over. "We must pray. Pray." Brittany's laugh was bitter. "They used my divorce as their excuse, Dad. While you were counseling me about my failed marriage, your other daughter was destroying hers. Where were your prayers then?" Nancy's coffee cups rattled on their tray as she set them down too hard. "That's enough. What's done is done. What matters now is how we move forward." Move forward. Margaret's voice rose, sharp and incredulous. "Nancy, they've made us all complicit. Every Sunday dinner, every family gathering. We were all part of their lie." "No," Daniel interrupted firmly. "We were victims of their lie. But not anymore." The final piece of evidence played. Footage from the firm showing Evelyn upgrading the camera system herself, unknowingly creating the tools of her own downfall. Richard Peterson flipped open his notebook. The firm's bylaws are clear about moral conduct and resource misuse. Tomorrow's board meeting is a formality. "What about Laura's parents?" Elizabeth asked. "Shouldn't they be here?" "They'll see it soon enough," Joshua replied hollowly. "Sunday service should be interesting." The gathering slowly dissolved, family members leaving in pairs or small groups, weighed down by the events they had witnessed. Elizabeth hugged Daniel before departing, whispering, "I'm sorry they weren't who we thought they were." Richard stayed behind, reviewing documents with James in the study. Nancy began mechanically clearing coffee cups, her movements automatic, the routine of a host ingrained over decades. Brittany joined her, quietly gathering scattered napkins and empty pitchers. "You okay, Mom?" Nancy's hands stilled over a cup. "I keep thinking about last Christmas. All of us together, taking photos, making plans. Was it all a lie?" "Not all of it," Daniel answered from the doorway. "Just them." The next morning, Daniel arrived at the firm an hour before the board meeting. Evidence sat in neat folders on the conference table. Hotel footage, security camera clips, billing records, all meticulously organized. Simon arrived last. His polished appearance showed cracks. A crooked tie, bloodshot eyes. He looked like every guilty client they had ever represented. "The board's decision is already made," Simon said quietly as the members filed in. "Isn't it? You made their decision." "Weeks ago," Daniel replied. "Every time you used this firm to conduct your affair." The meeting was brief and clinical. Each board member reviewed the evidence in silence, their expressions growing graver with every page. Simon didn't even try to defend himself. By afternoon, the firm's name had changed to Harper Legal Solutions. Simon's office was being packed up by movers, his nameplate already gone from the door. Meanwhile, Laura discovered her access to the firm's social media had been revoked. Her carefully curated online persona crumbled as family members shared their truths. Elizabeth Carlson's post hit especially hard. Sometimes the people we look up to the most let us down the worst. Hashtag family betrayer. Months passed. Simon moved to Arizona, his legal career in ruins. Laura took a job in Seattle, her self-imposed exile necessary for everyone's peace. The holes they left in the family fabric slowly healed, replaced by stronger bonds among those who remained. Brittany proved invaluable as office manager, her efficiency stabilizing the firm during its transition. Sunday dinners at the Harper household became smaller, but more meaningful. Even Elizabeth began attending regularly, her teenage honesty often cutting through adult pretense with refreshing clarity. 6 months after the family meeting, Daniel sat in his expanded office, now the managing partner of the city's most successful family law firm. The divorce had been finalized weeks earlier, Laura's claims of mental distress collapsing under evidence of premeditation. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Caitlin Callahan entered, her PI badge catching the light. She had taken over security for the firm after the reorganization, her sharp instincts and attention to detail proving invaluable. The Petersons called, she said. Elizabeth's working on a school paper about professional ethics and wants to interview you, Caitlin said, breaking the silence. Daniel smiled slightly. The teenager's pointed questions during that fateful family meeting had stayed with him over the years. Set it up, he replied. Caitlin hesitated for a moment, then added, I was also thinking dinner? That new place on Fifth. Something had been quietly growing between them, slowly, cautiously. What began as professional respect had turned into friendship, possibly more. Neither was in a rush. They'd both seen too many relationships crumble to take anything for granted. Daniel glanced at his desk, where a new family photo sat. Himself with his parents, Brittany, Elizabeth, and the others who had stood by him. In the wastebasket below, the shredded remains of his wedding photo served as a stark reminder of how quickly life could change. Dinner sounds good, he said, rising and turning off the office lights. As he walked out, he reflected that the best revenge wasn't just exposing the truth. It was thriving afterward, and surrounded by those who had chosen truth over comfort, loyalty over lies. Daniel was finally starting to thrive again. Elizabeth's latest Instagram post captured it perfectly. Family isn't always who you're born to or married to. Sometimes it's who stands by you when truth matters more than comfort. Hashtag lessons learned, hashtag stronger together. 5 years later, autumn leaves scattered across the courthouse steps as Daniel Harper exited the building. Another case successfully concluded. At 43, success sat comfortably on his shoulders. Harper Legal Solutions had become the most respected family law firm across 3 states, with a particular reputation for handling complex infidelity cases. His phone buzzed with a text from Caitlin. Elizabeth's graduation ceremony starts at 6. Don't be late. She wants both her godparents there. Daniel smiled, still amazed at how life had rearranged itself. Elizabeth Carlson, the teenager who had once witnessed her family's implosion, had grown into a formidable young woman. Now graduating from law school, she had already accepted a junior position at Harper Legal Solutions, determined to follow in her godfather's footsteps. On the drive to his mother's house, Daniel passed the old Harper and Dow building. The sign had long since changed, but sometimes he caught himself remembering those final days. The stripping of Evelyn's name from the letterhead, the scandal that had shaken their professional community to its core. When Daniel arrived, Nancy's driveway was already full. Sunday dinners had evolved, but never stopped. Through the window, he could see Brittany directing caterers, her efficiency as his office manager extending seamlessly to family gatherings. Her own divorce was 5 years behind her now, and her recent engagement to James Peterson, Richard's son, had brought new joy to both families. Inside, the house hummed with life and activity. Elizabeth was perched at the kitchen counter, law books spread out as she prepared for the bar exam. Her thesis, The Ethics of Family Law, Personal Experience as Professional Foundation, had already garnered attention in legal circles. Uncle Daniel, She jumped up to hug him. The title of uncle had shifted to something honorary, but no less heartfelt. Did you see? The Arizona bar finally disbarred Evelyn last week. Daniel nodded. He had seen the news. Evelyn's attempt to rebuild her career in Arizona had crumbled under the weight of new scandals. Inappropriate relationships with clients, misused funds, and a pattern of behavior that made it clear her affair with Laura hadn't been an isolated incident. Her third wife left her too, Elizabeth added, her journalism minor showing in her knack for collecting details. Apparently, she found her with her paralegal. Some people never change, Caitlin commented, walking in from the living room. Her PI badge, now reading director of security, gleamed slightly in the light. Harper Legal Solutions had expanded to include comprehensive investigation services under Caitlin's leadership. The gold band on her left hand glinted in the light. She and Daniel had married 2 years ago in a small ceremony at the Harper family garden. Nancy emerged from her study, her silver hair impeccably styled. No shop talk before dinner, she announced. Elizabeth needs to focus on her graduation speech. Speaking of speeches, Brittany called from the dining room. Dad sends his regrets. Church council meeting ran long. Joshua Dow had spent years rebuilding his pastoral reputation after his daughter's scandal. The affair had cost him some congregants, but his public acknowledgement of family pain and healing ultimately strengthened his ministry. He now specialized in counseling families torn apart by infidelity. Did you hear about Laura? Nancy asked quietly as she and Daniel set the table. Old habits died hard. She still used the Wedgwood china for Sunday dinners. Daniel nodded. Through the legal grapevine and Elizabeth's sharp eye on social media, they had kept tabs on his ex-wife. After Seattle, she had moved to Portland, then San Francisco, each relocation marked by diminishing returns. Her attempts to rebuild her marketing career faltered as the scandal followed her. Background checks continually revealed the story, and in the age of social media, nothing stayed buried. She tried reaching out to Brittany last month. Nancy continued, aligning a fork with precision. Wanted to explain her side after all these years. What did Brittany say? Daniel asked. Nothing. She blocked her number. Nancy replied firmly. Some bridges stay burned. The doorbell rang. James Peterson arrived with his father, Richard. The elder Peterson had officially retired but still consulted on complex cases. His son had followed. Him into law, but focused on corporate litigation instead of family law. His courtship of Brittany had been patient and considerate, honoring her past pain. Anyone see the new profile on Harper Legal? James asked as they settled at the table. National Law Review did quite a spread. Daniel had seen it. The article praised the firm's innovative approach to infidelity cases, highlighting its integration of digital forensics and social media evidence. What had begun as a personal tragedy had transformed into professional expertise. They interviewed me for it, Elizabeth added proudly. Wanted the perspective of someone who'd witnessed the firm's evolution firsthand. Speaking of transformations, Caitlin interjected, Margaret mentioned running into Valerie Morrow in Chicago last week. Valerie, Evelyn's ex-fiancée, who had famously thrown her engagement ring across the room, had turned her anger into action. She now ran a nonprofit helping women rebuild their lives after betrayal, her personal experience lending authenticity to her mission. Everything's different now, Elizabeth mused, glancing around the table. But better, right? More real. Daniel squeezed Caitlin's hand under the table. 5 years had changed everything and nothing. The pain had healed into scars, but the lessons endured. Trust, once broken, never returned the same. Yet new trust, built on truth and shared healing, could grow even stronger. Later that evening, as guests departed and Nancy methodically packed up leftovers, Daniel wandered into his father's old study. James Sr. had passed 2 years ago, but his presence lingered in the worn leather chairs and neatly shelved law books. A framed article on the wall caught Daniel's eye, the first major piece about Harper Legal Solutions transformation. Beneath it hung a family photo from last Christmas. The faces had changed over the years, some absent, others new. But the core remained, stronger for having weathered the storm. His phone buzzed with an email alert. A new client referral. Another high-profile infidelity case, the kind that had become their specialty. Still at it, Caitlin said, appearing in the doorway. Elizabeth wants your input on her graduation speech. She's thinking of addressing professional ethics and personal experience. Tell her to speak her truth, Daniel replied. It's what she does best. They walked out together, passing the spot where Valerie's engagement ring had been hidden under the cabinet for months before being found during renovations. Nancy had melted it down and used the platinum to create pendants for the women in the family, symbols of transformation. In the car, Daniel's phone buzzed with a news alert. Simon's latest troubles were making headlines in Arizona. His brother's path of self-destruction continued, each new scandal echoing the last. Some patterns, it seemed, were too deeply ingrained to break. Laura's latest social media profile listed her as a marketing consultant in San Francisco, but her client list was sparse. Her carefully curated posts depicted a life stripped of family connections, every holiday marked by generic updates rather than shared memories. Her third attempt at relationship counseling had ended like the others. Trust, once fundamentally broken, proved impossible for her to rebuild. The drive home took them past the Crestwood Hotel, still standing, but now under new management. Room 304 had been renovated during a remodel, erasing the physical space of Betrayal, though its impact continued to echo through lives and decades. Elizabeth had interviewed the hotel's former manager for her thesis. The interesting thing, she told Daniel, isn't just how secrets come out, but how people rebuild afterward. Some never do. Others build something stronger from the wreckage. Their house, the one Daniel and Caitlin had bought together 2 years ago, sat on a quiet street, far from his old neighborhood. No ghosts here, no memories of betrayal, just new traditions being built one day at a time. Brittany and James set a date, Caitlin mentioned as they settled in. Next spring, in the garden where we got married. Daniel nodded. The symmetry felt right. New joy blooming where old pain had taken root. His laptop displayed a calendar reminder. Elizabeth's graduation next month, then her bar exam, then her official start at the firm. The next generation was ready to take up the mantle, turning personal history into professional wisdom. Do you ever regret it? Caitlin asked quietly. How public everything became? Daniel considered the question. The exposure had been brutal, but necessary. The full truth had prevented any rewriting of history, any softening of consequences. No, he finally replied. Secrets protect the wrong people. Truth protects the right ones. On his desk sat a letter he hadn't shared yet, an invitation to keynote the National Family Law Conference. The topic, when professional expertise meets personal experience, transforming private pain into public justice. 5 years had turned betrayal into expertise, pain into purpose. Simon and Laura's choices had rippled through dozens of lives, but those ripples had shaped something stronger in their wake. Elizabeth's latest Instagram post captured it perfectly. 5 years ago, I watched my family implode. Today, I'm graduating law school, joining the firm that rose from those ashes, and helping others find their way through darkness. Sometimes the worst chapter of your story becomes the foundation for someone else's healing. The post had thousands of likes, including one from Valerie Morrow's nonprofit and another from Joshua Dow's church counseling program. Even in darkness, light had found a way through. Daniel closed his laptop and joined Caitlin on their back porch. The autumn air carried hints of wood smoke and the changing seasons. Tomorrow would bring new cases, new challenges, and new opportunities to turn experience into expertise. But tonight was for reflection, for acknowledging how far they'd come since that Sunday morning 5 years ago, when truth had shattered pretense. The pieces had reformed into something different, but stronger, a mosaic of chosen family, hard-won wisdom, and purposeful justice. Sometimes, Daniel reflected, the best revenge isn't just exposing the truth, or even thriving afterward. It's using your scars to help others heal, turning personal pain into purpose, and building something so strong that the original wound becomes just one chapter in a much longer, richer story. This is where the story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I'll see you there.